The autumn wind carried whispers of winter through Montana's Copper Creek Valley. Frost kissed the edges of window panes while the last golden leaves clung desperately to their branches. Emma Hayes stood before her classroom of adults, chalk dust drifting in the amber glow of oil lamps. At 28, she possessed a quiet dignity beyond her years, her chestnut hair pulled back in a practical bun, green eyes reflecting both intelligence and carefully guarded pain. To understand justice, Emma explained, gesturing to the blackboard where she'd written passages from Thoreau, we must first understand what it means to live by principle. Several men nodded their weathered faces, thoughtful. Miners, shopkeepers, and ranchers, all seeking education in this frontier town, slowly transforming from wilderness to civilization. Emma had returned to Montana 8 months ago, after 8 years in Boston, bringing Eastern education to this Western outpost. Yet her reasons for returning ran deeper than teaching. The classroom's warmth contrasted with the biting cold outside, where darkness had long since fallen. Emma's students hunched over their primers, scratching out letters with calloused hands more accustomed to pickaxes and lassos than pencils. Emma glanced at the window, where frost patterns resembled delicate ferns. Beyond the glass lay Montana's vast expanse, the same landscape that had witnessed her father's murder 8 years before. Judge Harold Hayes, respected and feared for his unwavering integrity, shot in his own chambers while 16-year-old Emma waited outside. A sharp crack split the night. For a heartbeat, Emma froze, that terrible memory superimposed over the present. Then instinct took over as glass shattered. Students shouted in alarm as a man crashed through the window in an explosion of crystalline shards and crimson droplets. He collapsed onto the floor, blood rapidly spreading beneath him. "Get down!" Emma commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. More shots rang out from outside. The students scrambled for cover, overturning desks and benches. "Out the back!" Emma directed, pointing toward the rear door. "Quickly now!" The adults needed no further encouragement, rushing toward safety, as Emma moved against the tide toward the fallen stranger. Outside, men's voices called to each other, horses snorting in the cold. The stranger, a man in his 30s, with several days' growth of beard, clutched his side, where blood seeped between his fingers. "Find him!" a voice shouted from outside. "The traitor can't have gone far!" Emma made her decision in seconds. As the last student fled, she locked the back door behind them, then hurried to secure the front entrance and douse all but one lamp. She dragged the wounded man behind her desk, leaving a crimson trail across the wooden planks. In the near darkness, she assessed him quickly. Tall and lean, with a strong jaw, and clothes that had once been fine, but were now trail-worn. The wound at his side pulsed steadily, a stab wound, not a gunshot. He'd lost consciousness, his breathing shallow. Boots crunched on broken glass as someone approached the shattered window. Emma crouched lower, reaching for the small derringer she kept in her desk drawer. Her father's gun, the one thing of his she'd carried with her to Boston. "Miss Hayes," a man's voice, cultured and familiar. "Victor Wallace, the bank owner. Are you there? We're looking for a dangerous man, a fugitive." Emma remained silent, her hand closed around the derringer's pearl grip. "Emma," Wallace called again. "If you're in there, please answer. We're concerned for your safety." The wounded stranger stirred, his eyes fluttering. Emma pressed her hand against his mouth. "There's blood here," another voice reported. "A trail leading inside." "Check the schoolhouse," Wallace commanded. Thoroughly. Emma's heartbeat thundered in her ears as she glanced around desperately. The storage room. It was their only chance. With surprising strength, born of desperation, she hooked her arms beneath the stranger's shoulders and dragged him toward the small closet at the rear of the classroom. Every scrape of his boots against the floorboards sounded deafening in her ears. Just as the front door rattled with attempted entry, Emma pulled the stranger into the storage room and silently closed the door. Darkness enveloped them, the small space crowded with books and supplies. She could feel the man's labored breathing against her as they pressed together in the confined space. The classroom door splintered open. "Search everything," Wallace ordered. "He couldn't have gotten far with that wound." Emma closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the derringer in her hand, her father's last gift. The wounded man stirred against her, a low moan building in his throat. She pressed her hand more firmly over his mouth, feeling warm breath against her palm. Footsteps moved across the classroom, drawing nearer to their hiding place. Emma's free hand found the stranger's, squeezing it in warning. To her surprise, he squeezed back. He was conscious, aware enough to understand their danger. The storage room doorknob turned. Emma raised the derringer. "Nothing in the back rooms," a voice called from elsewhere in the building. "But there's blood leading out the rear door." The doorknob stilled. "He's made for the woods, then," Wallace replied. "Get the horses. We'll need to spread out. And someone fetch Sheriff Miller." The footsteps receded. Emma remained frozen, counting her heartbeats until she heard the men depart. Only then did she release her breath and remove her hand from the stranger's mouth. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice rough with pain. Emma didn't respond immediately, instead cracking the door to confirm they were truly alone. The classroom sat empty, the broken door swinging gently in the draft from the shattered window. "You're Nathan Reed," she said, surprising herself with the recognition. "Federal Marshal." His eyes widened slightly. "How did you—" "Your face was in the newspaper last spring," Emma explained. "Something about testifying before Congress about frontier justice." She helped him from the storage room to her desk chair, where the lamplight revealed his features more clearly. Handsome, in a weathered way, with intelligent eyes now clouded by pain. Blood had soaked through his shirt and vest. "I need to tend that wound," she said, already moving to gather supplies from the first aid kit she kept for schoolyard injuries. "Or you'll bleed out before morning." "No time," Nathan grimaced, attempting to stand. "I need to reach Helena by dawn. Lives depend on it." He swayed dangerously, and Emma pushed him back into the chair with surprising firmness. "You won't make it across the street in your condition," she stated flatly. "Let me help you, then we'll discuss Helena." Without waiting for permission, she unbuttoned his vest and lifted his blood-soaked shirt. The wound was deep, a knife thrust below the ribs that had mercifully missed vital organs. Emma worked efficiently, cleaning the wound with whiskey from the flask she confiscated last week from an overconfident 16-year-old boy. Nathan hissed as the alcohol burned but made no other sound of protest. His eyes studied her face as she worked, a question forming there. "You have medical training?" he asked. "My father insisted," Emma replied, threading a needle. "He believed a frontier woman should know how to treat everything from snake bites to gunshot wounds." Something flickered in Nathan's expression. "Your father sounds like a wise man." "He was," Emma said, emphasizing the past tense as she began stitching the wound. They fell silent as she worked, the only sounds their breathing and the occasional creak of the old schoolhouse settling. Outside, distant shouting indicated the search continued. "They'll come back," Nathan said finally. "Wallace and his men." Emma tied off the last stitch and began bandaging his torso with strips of clean cloth. "Who's after you, Marshal Reed? And why does our esteemed bank president want you dead?" Nathan's jaw tightened. "It's complicated." "It always is." Emma secured the bandage and stood to wash the blood from her hands in the basin. But considering I just committed a crime by hiding a fugitive, whatever your actual status, I believe I'm entitled to an explanation." Nathan watched her calculation in his gaze. "What do you know about Victor Wallace? Respected businessman, widower, philanthropist." Emma dried her hands. "He funded the new church and half the buildings on Main Street." "And what do you know about the Montana Star Association?" Emma froze, the towel clutched in suddenly bloodless fingers. Her father's pendant, hidden beneath her high-collared blouse, seemed to burn against her skin. The silver star had been his most treasured possession. "I've never heard of it," she lied. Nathan's eyes narrowed, but before he could respond, he was overcome by a wave of dizziness. Emma caught him as he slumped forward, easing him back in the chair. "You've lost too much blood," she murmured. "You need rest." "My saddlebag," Nathan insisted weakly. "Where is it?" Emma glanced around, spotting a worn leather bag that had fallen near the broken window. She retrieved it, noticing its surprising weight. "Don't open it," Nathan warned. "Just keep it safe." His eyes were fighting to stay open, the blood loss and trauma taking their toll. Emma made a quick decision. "We can't stay here. They'll return to search more thoroughly once they don't find your trail." She hoisted his arm across her shoulders. "My house is just behind the school. Do you think you can make it that far?" Nathan nodded grimly, gathering his remaining strength. Together, they staggered through the back door and into the biting cold. The night had grown overcast, the darkness nearly complete, as they made their painful way across the small yard to Emma's modest cabin. She glanced constantly over her shoulder, but the search party's lanterns bobbed in the distance, focused on the edge of town. Inside her small home, Emma helped Nathan to the narrow bed in the corner. The one-room cabin was neat and sparsely furnished, a teacher's quarters, not a home. Only a small shelf of books and a framed family photograph suggested any personal touches. Nathan collapsed onto the mattress, his face gray with exhaustion and pain. Emma stoked the embers in the small stove, bringing warmth back to the room, then hung blankets over the windows. "Rest," she instructed, placing his saddlebag beside the bed. "I need to return to the school and clean up the blood before morning. If anyone comes, stay quiet." Nathan caught her wrist as she turned to leave. "Why are you helping me?" Emma hesitated. The question had been haunting her since she'd made the decision to hide him. Why risk everything, her position, her reputation, her safety for a stranger? The answer lay buried in memories of her father's voice, in the principles he'd lived by and died for. "Because it's right," she said simply, gently, extracting her wrist from his grip. Once back at the schoolhouse, Emma worked quickly by lamplight, mopping up blood and sweeping broken glass. She righted overturned furniture, all the while listening for returning searchers. By the time she finished, dawn was approaching, her hands raw from scrubbing and cold water. She returned to find Nathan in the grip of fever, his body's response to trauma and exposure. Throughout the day, Emma tended him between her teaching duties, making excuses to check on her headache during breaks. By nightfall, his condition had worsened, his skin burning, while his body shook with chills. Emma pressed cold compresses to his forehead, remembering nights she'd done the same for her father during his final illness. Nathan muttered in delirium fragments about The Wire and October 15th and They'll All Die. As midnight approached, his fever peaked. Emma sat beside him, bathing his face and neck with cool water, when suddenly his hand shot out, gripping her arm with surprising strength. "Harold," he gasped, eyes unfocused. "They found the ledger. Montana Star. Betrayed from within." Emma went still, her blood turning to ice. Harold, her father's name. This delirious man was speaking of her father dead these 8 years. "How do you know that name?" she demanded. But Nathan had slipped back into unconsciousness. With trembling fingers, Emma reached for the silver chain around her neck, withdrawing the pendant hidden beneath her nightdress. A 5-pointed star intricately carved from Montana silver, her father's most precious possession given to her as he lay dying. "Keep it safe," he'd whispered. "One day someone will come who recognizes its meaning. Then you'll know who to trust." Emma had never understood those final words. She'd returned to Montana partially to solve the mystery of her father's murder, but in 8 months had discovered nothing. Now a bleeding marshal had crashed through her window, pursued by the town's most respected citizen, speaking her father's name in delirium. Dawn found Emma dozing in the chair beside Nathan's bed, awakening to the sound of movement. Nathan was attempting to sit up, his face lined with pain, but his eyes clear. "What day is it?" he asked immediately. "October 12th, Emma replied. Relief washed over his features. "There's still time." Emma poured a cup of water and helped him drink. "Time for what, Marshal Reed? And how do you know my father's name?" Nathan studied her face. "Harold Hayes was your father." Emma nodded, one hand unconsciously moving to the hidden pendant. "That explains much," Nathan murmured. "Judge Hayes was a great man. His death was a terrible loss to Montana and to the association." "The Montana Star Association," Emma supplied. "What is it? And what did it have to do with my father?" Nathan's expression grew cautious. "If you don't know, perhaps it's safer." "Don't!" Emma interrupted, anger flaring. "Don't protect me from the truth. I've waited 8 years to understand why my father was murdered. If you know something, tell me." Nathan was silent for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Your father was a founding member of the Montana Star Association, a secret society of judges, lawmen, and honest officials fighting against the Gold Coalition." "The what?" "The Gold Coalition," Nathan repeated. "A criminal syndicate controlling most of the gold mines and half the territorial government. Your father discovered they were planning to poison Copper Creek's water supply to force people off valuable land. Before he could expose them, he was assassinated." Emma sat heavily on the edge of the bed, memories rearranging themselves like puzzle pieces. Her father's late nights, whispered conversations, mysterious visitors. The silver star pendant. "I came back to Montana to find answers," she whispered. "To understand why he died." "And now you're harboring the most wanted man in the territory," Nathan said grimly. "Wallace is no mere banker. He's the coalition's public face, respectable above suspicion." "And Sheriff Miller, is he involved too?" Nathan's expression darkened. "Up to his neck. Your town's lawman is one of their enforcers." Emma stood abruptly, moving to a loose floorboard beneath her small writing desk. She pried it up and withdrew a leather-bound journal. "My father's diary. I found it hidden in our old cabin last month. Most entries are in code, but there are names, including Wallace's." Nathan's eyes widened. "That journal could be the evidence we need." "May I?" Emma hesitated, then handed him the book. Nathan flipped through pages with growing excitement. "This is it," he breathed. "Dates, meeting locations, transactions. Your father was building a case against the entire coalition." "But what does this have to do with you?" Emma asked. "Why were you shot?" Nathan closed the journal carefully. "I was in Butte investigating a series of suspicious deaths, all association members. I uncovered evidence of a planned mass assassination scheduled for October 15th. All remaining association members gathered in Helena for the territorial court session." He reached for his saddlebag, wincing at the movement. From it, he withdrew a sealed envelope. This contains the names of coalition members embedded in the territorial government, along with details of the assassination plot. If I don't get this to Helena before the 15th dozens will die, and the last opposition to the coalition will be eliminated. Emma's mind reeled with implications. And Wallace tried to kill you to prevent this information from reaching Helena. Yes, Nathan confirmed, but he doesn't know what's in my possession. He only knows I'm dangerous to their plans. Emma paced the small cabin, her teacher's mind organizing facts and possibilities. You can't travel in your condition, but this information must reach Helena. I'll manage, Nathan insisted again, attempting to rise. The effort left him pale and sweating. Don't be foolish, Emma scolded. You'd collapse before reaching the town limits. We need another solution. As they debated options, a knock at the door silenced them both. Emma motioned for Nathan to stay silent, then approached cautiously. Who is it? She called. Miss Hayes, it's Victor Wallace. I wanted to check on you after last night's excitement. Emma glanced at Nathan, who had drawn a revolver from his saddlebag. She opened the door just enough to reveal her face. Wallace stood on her threshold, impeccably dressed, as always, his silver hair and beard giving him a distinguished appearance. Behind him, 2 men waited with horses. Mr. Wallace, Emma greeted, injecting surprise into her voice. What brings you here so early? There was an incident at the schoolhouse last night. Wallace explained, his tone concerned. A dangerous fugitive. I wanted to ensure you were unharmed. Fugitive goodness. Emma affected ignorance. I left early with a headache. Is the school damaged? A broken window, nothing more. We're searching for the man, a dangerous imposter, claiming to be a federal marshal. Wallace studied her face carefully. You've seen no strangers about... No one. Emma lied smoothly. Though I've been indisposed since yesterday afternoon. Wallace nodded, apparently satisfied. We'll have the window repaired today. You should know we've posted men around town for safety until this criminal is apprehended. His emphasis on safety carried a subtle threat that raised the hairs on Emma's neck. How reassuring, she managed. Thank you for your concern. After Wallace departed, Emma closed the door and leaned against it, heart racing. He suspects something. Yes, Nathan agreed, and he's ensuring we can't leave town easily. Throughout the day, Emma noticed men stationed at strategic points around town as she went about her abbreviated teaching schedule. The school buzzed with rumors about the mysterious fugitive, while Emma maintained her facade of ignorance. By evening, Nathan's condition had improved enough for proper conversation. They sat at Emma's small table, the journal open between them, a single lamp casting long shadows. October 14th, Emma mused. That's when my father was killed, 8 years ago tomorrow. The anniversary isn't coincidental, Nathan said. The coalition is planning to eliminate the association on the same date they killed its founder. Emma traced her father's handwriting on the journal's pages. All these years, I've carried his star without understanding its meaning. After a moment's hesitation, she withdrew the pendant from beneath her collar. The silver star caught the lamplight, 5 points gleaming with subtle engravings. Nathan's breath caught. You have his insignia. He gave it to me as he was dying, Emma explained. Said someone would come who recognized it, that I would know who to trust. Their eyes met across the table, a moment of connection that transcended their brief acquaintance. In that gaze lay shared purpose, shared loss, and something deeper neither was ready to acknowledge. The moment was broken by a sharp knock. They both tensed, but the pattern, 3 quick taps, a pause, then 2 more, was deliberate. Association signal, Nathan whispered, reaching for his gun. Emma approached the door cautiously. Who's there? An old friend, came the reply. Who remembers when the North Star guided a young girl home? Emma's breath caught. The phrase evoked a childhood memory, her father teaching her to navigate by stars when they'd gotten lost hunting. Only one person had witnessed that lesson. She opened the door to reveal James Cooper, the school's elderly caretaker. His weathered face was grim as he stepped inside, nodding respectfully to Nathan. Marshal Reed, he acknowledged. Judge Hayes would be glad his daughter found you. Mr. Cooper, Emma's voice reflected her confusion. You're part of this. The old man smiled sadly. Your father recruited me 15 years ago. I've watched over you since your return, waiting for the right moment. He removed his hat, revealing a shock of white hair. Wallace has men surrounding the town. The stagecoach and telegraph office are watched. You'll never reach Helena by conventional means. Then what do you suggest? Nathan asked. James's eyes twinkled despite the gravity of the situation. Judge Hayes prepared for such contingencies. There's a tunnel beneath the schoolhouse built during the mining boom. It leads to the hills beyond town. Emma stared at him. A tunnel in my school. Your father believed in having escape routes, James explained. The entrance is hidden in the storage room floor. Nathan looked to Emma. We could leave tonight, reach the old mountain trail by morning. Emma raised an eyebrow. I need your help, Nathan admitted. I'm not at full strength, and you know this country. Together, we have a chance. Emma considered her teaching position, her quiet life, the safety she'd carefully constructed. Then she thought of her father's journal, his pendant, his final words, the pieces of a puzzle she'd spent 8 years trying to solve. I'll come, she decided. But first, we need supplies. As Emma gathered necessities, food, medicines, warm clothing, James shared what he knew of Wallace's men and their positions. Nathan studied the journal, occasionally making notes. Your father's cabin, James suggested. It would make a good stopping point. It's defensible, and there are supplies cached there. The cabin's been abandoned since his death, Emma said. I've only visited once since returning. Nevertheless, James insisted, it's your best option before the mountain pass. Their planning was interrupted by a sound outside, horses approaching. James peered through the window covering. Wallace's men, he reported grimly. Coming this way. Nathan struggled to his feet, his hand on his gun. They're making their move. Take this! James pressed a revolver into Emma's hands, newer and larger than her derringer. Your father would want you armed properly. Emma accepted the weapon, feeling its weight, both physical and symbolic. How do we reach the tunnel? Through the back to the school, James instructed. I'll delay them here. They'll hurt you, Emma protested. The old man's smile was fierce. I've lived long enough, child. Your father saved my life once. Let me return the favor by saving his daughter. There was no time for lengthy goodbyes. Emma embraced James quickly. Then she and Nathan slipped out the back door into the darkness. Behind them, they heard James greeting Wallace's men, loudly creating a diversion. They reached the schoolhouse unseen and entered through the rear door. Inside the storage room, Emma located the trapdoor James had described, hidden beneath a heavy cabinet. They struggled to move silently. The tunnel below was narrow and low-ceilinged, forcing them to proceed in a crouch. The air was stale but breathable, the passage surprisingly well constructed. Mining engineers built these, Nathan observed, his voice echoing slightly. The association repurposed many old mine workings. They emerged nearly a mile from town in a stand of pines that offered concealment. The night was clear and cold, stars blazing overhead in the vast Montana sky. Emma paused, gazing up at the constellations her father had taught her to read. "The North Star," she murmured. "It guided me home once. Now it's leading me away." Nathan followed her gaze upward. "Sometimes we find home in purpose, not place." Their eyes met in the starlight, an unspoken understanding passing between them. Then, securing their packs, they began the long journey toward Harold Hayes's abandoned cabin and the truth Emma had sought for 8 years. The mountain path wound through pine forests silvered by moonlight. Emma led the way, her steps sure despite the years away. Nathan followed, his strength gradually returning, but his wound still limiting his endurance. They traveled through the night, pausing only when necessary. Dawn found them approaching the ridge where Harold Hayes had built his retreat, a sturdy cabin overlooking the valley, remote enough for privacy, but positioned to observe the approaches. Emma paused at the final bend, emotion overtaking her at the sight of the place where her childhood summers had been spent. "Are you all right?" Nathan asked quietly. Emma nodded, swallowing the knot in her throat. "It's been a long time." They approached cautiously, scanning for signs of occupation or surveillance. The cabin appeared untouched, weathered by years of Montana winters, but still sound. Emma retrieved the key from its hiding place beneath a particular stone, her father's habits unchanged even in this remote location. Inside, dust covered every surface, the air stale and cold. Emma moved through the space like a ghost, touching objects from her past. Her father's pipe on the mantel, law books on shelves, a shawl that might have been her mother's draped over a chair. "We should rest," Nathan suggested, noting her emotional fatigue. "We've covered good ground." Emma nodded absently, still absorbed in memories. Nathan busied himself lighting the stove and securing the cabin, allowing her privacy for her reunion with the past. As warmth gradually filled the cabin, Emma discovered something alarming: signs that someone had searched the place. Certain books were misaligned, floorboards showed scratch marks. Her father's desk drawers were subtly out of place. "Someone's been here," she reported, showing Nathan the evidence. "Recently." Nathan examined the disturbances with professional attention. Thorough, but trying to hide their tracks. They were looking for something specific. "The journal," Emma suggested. "Possibly. Or something else your father might have hidden." Nathan glanced around the cabin. "We should assume they'll return." This lent urgency to their rest. They took turns sleeping, one always on watch, the hours passing in tense quiet. By late afternoon, they were preparing to continue their journey when Emma noticed something, a carving on the underside of her father's desk, revealed only when seated in his chair. A small 5-pointed star matching her pendant. "Nathan," she called softly, "look at this." Together they examined the carving, pressing and probing, until a hidden compartment in the desk clicked open. Inside lay a sealed letter addressed simply, "To my daughter, when the time comes." With trembling fingers, Emma broke the seal, unfolding yellowed pages covered in her father's distinctive handwriting. She read aloud, her voice growing increasingly strained. "My dearest Emma, if you're reading this, I am gone, and you have returned seeking answers. I pray the star led you to allies, not enemies. The truth I've hidden from you is dangerous, but you deserve to know why our family was torn apart." The Montana Star Association began as 5 judges committed to fighting corruption in the territory. As gold brought wealth and power, it also brought those who would use that power to control Montana's future. The Gold Coalition rose from mining interests, spreading like poison through government and law enforcement. But there is a more personal truth you must know. Your mother did not abandon us as I led you to believe. Margaret was a federal investigator working undercover within the coalition. When her cover was threatened, we staged her departure to protect both of you. The night you heard us arguing, It was staged for any listening ears. For 8 years, she has maintained her cover-gathering evidence at tremendous risk. I don't know if she still lives, but if she does, she is in grave danger. Victor Wallace and Daniel Miller. Men I once called friends are central figures in the coalition. Trust no one who stands with them. But know this, your mother's brother, James Cooper, remains loyal. Seek him out. The key enclosed opens a strongbox hidden in the stone chimney of our Helena house. It contains everything Margaret and I collected against the coalition. I'm sorry for the burden this places on you. Know that I have always been proud of you, and that everything I've done was to secure a just future for Montana and for you. With eternal love, your father. Emma's voice broke on the final words. She sat motionless, the letter trembling in her grasp, tears streaming down her face. "My mother is alive," she whispered. "Or was. All this time." Nathan placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "This changes everything. If Margaret Hayes has been undercover in the coalition for 8 years, she might know about the assassination plot," Emma realized, wiping away tears. "She might be able to help us." "Or she might be the target," Nathan cautioned. "If her cover was compromised..." Emma examined the letter again, finding a small brass key taped to the final page. "The strong box in Helena. We need to reach it." Night had fallen outside, the temperature dropping rapidly. They decided to remain at the cabin until first light, then make for Helena by the most direct mountain route. As they ate a sparse meal, Emma's mind whirled with revelations. "I've spent 8 years believing my mother abandoned us," she said quietly. "Hating her for leaving, blaming myself for not being enough to make her stay." "Your father was protecting you both," Nathan observed. "It couldn't have been an easy choice." "No," Emma agreed. "Nothing about this has been easy." They lapsed into silence, the weight of shared purpose settling between them. Emma studied Nathan in the firelight, his composed features, the quiet strength in his bearing. "How did you join the association?" A shadow passed over Nathan's face. "My father was Judge William Reed, the first association member killed by the coalition. 10 years ago." "I'm sorry," Emma said softly. "I was a regular marshal then," Nathan continued. "But after his murder, I dedicated myself to continuing his work. Your father recruited me personally." This connection to her father clearly meant something to Nathan. She could see it in the respect that tinged his voice whenever Harold Hayes was mentioned. "What was he like?" Emma asked. "As a colleague, I mean. I knew him as a father, but..." "Formidable," Nathan replied with a small smile. "Brilliant legal mind, uncompromising integrity, but also kind in his way. He spoke of you often, his brilliant daughter in Boston, making him proud." Emma's heart constricted at this glimpse of her father through another's eyes. "I came back too late," she whispered. 8 years too late to tell him I understood his strictness, his principles. "He knew," Nathan assured her. Their conversation was interrupted by a sound outside a branch snapping in the frozen night. Both reached for weapons, extinguishing the lamp in one synchronized movement. They positioned themselves on either side of the window, peering out into darkness. A shadowy figure approached through the trees, moving with deliberate stealth toward the cabin. Emma raised her revolver, but Nathan placed a restraining hand on her arm, pointing to something visible in the moonlight, a silver star pinned to the stranger's coat. "Association member," he whispered. The visitor used the same knock pattern James had employed. Nathan opened the door cautiously, gun still ready. The man who entered was middle-aged, his face weathered, but his eyes sharp beneath a battered hat. He nodded to Nathan, then stared at Emma with undisguised emotion. Judge Hayes's daughter, he breathed. The resemblance is remarkable. Who are you? Emma demanded, not lowering her weapon. Thomas Grant, he introduced himself. Doctor, association member, your father saved my life once. Nathan relaxed slightly. Dr. Grant is known to me. He can be trusted. Grant removed his hat, revealing graying hair. James Cooper sent word through our channels that you were heading for Helena. I've come to warn you the cabin is being watched. By whom? Nathan asked sharply. Coalition men arrived yesterday. They've been searching the area. Grant glanced at the letter still clutched in Emma's hand. You found it then? Your father's message? Emma nodded slowly. How did you know about it? I was with him when he wrote it, Grant explained. 2 days before he was killed. He knew they were closing in. Emma processed this. Do you know about my mother? Is she alive? Grant's expression grew grave. Margaret Hayes is alive as far as we know. Still embedded with the coalition. But her situation is precarious. Wallace has grown suspicious. Where is she? Emma pressed. The Silver Creek Mine, Grant replied. The coalition's headquarters, 10 miles north of Helena. Nathan exchanged a look with Emma. The mine isn't on any official maps. It's abandoned on paper, Grant explained. In reality, it's their command center and their prison. Emma's blood ran cold at the implication. They're holding her prisoner. Not exactly. Her cover remains intact, but she's closely watched. She hasn't been able to communicate with us in months. The doctor moved to the window, peering out anxiously. We need to leave now. Wallace's men know the marshal is injured. They're searching all possible shelter between here and Helena. How many? Nathan asked, already gathering their supplies. At least a dozen spread throughout the mountains, and Sheriff Miller is leading them personally. This news increased their urgency. Within minutes, they were following Grant through the forest away from the cabin and the road taking a game trail that wound higher into the mountains. There's an old mining cabin 3 miles from here, Grant explained as they hiked. Association members maintain it as a waypoint. We can rest there briefly. The night deepened around them, clouds obscuring the stars and moon as they climbed. The wind carried the scent of snow, an early winter storm approaching. Emma's thoughts churned with each step, her world transformed in less than 2 days. Her mother alive. The truth about her father's murder within reach. And beside her walked the man her father had trusted, carrying evidence that could bring justice to Montana if they survived to deliver it. The mountain path narrowed, forcing them to proceed single file. Grant led, then Emma, with Nathan bringing up the rear, despite his injury. The silence of the wilderness enveloped them, broken only by their breathing and the occasional distant howl of a wolf. The mining cabin appeared suddenly, a low structure built into the hillside for protection from storms. Grant approached first, checking for signs of disturbance, then signaled them forward. Inside was cramped but dry, with basic provisions stored in locked trunks. Grant lit a small, shielded lamp, revealing a table, 2 bunks, and a tiny stove. Maps covered one wall, detailed renderings of the territory marked with symbols Emma now recognized as association codes. Rest, Grant advised. We'll move again before dawn. As Nathan examined the maps, Emma questioned Grant about her mother. The doctor had known Margaret Hayes well, working with her before her deep cover assignment. Your mother is one of the bravest people I've ever known, Grant told her. She sacrificed everything, her home, watching her daughter grow up to bring down the coalition. Why didn't they tell me? Emma asked, the old hurt resurfacing. I was 16, not a child. Grant's expression was sympathetic. The fewer who knew, the safer she was. Even within the association, only 3 people knew she was alive: your father, James Cooper, and myself. This made painful sense, yet the years of unnecessary grief still stung. Emma might have pursued further questions, but a sound outside silenced them all, horses approaching. Grant doused the lamp immediately. "They've followed our trail." Nathan moved to the window, peering through a crack in the shutters. 3 riders, armed. Emma joined him, looking out at the moonlit clearing. Her heart stopped, and she recognized the lead rider, Sheriff Daniel Miller, her father's friend and colleague, now revealed as his betrayer. "Is there another exit?" Nathan whispered to Grant. The doctor nodded toward a trap door partially hidden by one of the bunks. "It leads to a mine shaft, follows the mountain for nearly a mile, emerges near Crystal Creek." As the riders dismounted, Grant made a swift decision. "You 2 go. I'll delay them." "They'll kill you," Emma protested. Grant's smile was resigned. "I'm dying anyway. Cancer. 6 months at most. Let me make this count." Before they could argue further, he pressed a packet into Nathan's hands. "Updated maps to the Silver Creek mine. And this," he handed Emma a small photograph. "Your mother last year. So you'll recognize her." Emma stared at the image, an older version of the mother she remembered, gray, streaking the once auburn hairlines around the eyes, but unmistakably Margaret Hayes. "Go," Grant urged. "For Harold. For Montana." The finality in his voice brooked no argument. Nathan opened the trap door, revealing narrow wooden steps descending into darkness. He went first, testing each step. Emma embraced Grant briefly. "Thank you." "Live to finish this," the doctor replied. "That's thanks enough." Emma descended into the mine shaft, Nathan just ahead with a small lantern taken from emergency supplies. Behind them, they heard Grant greeting the newcomers, loudly claiming to be a prospector sheltering from the approaching storm. The shaft was low and narrow, requiring them to stoop as they hurried forward. The air grew progressively damper and colder, the walls occasionally dripping with groundwater. Their progress was slow, hampered by fallen debris and Nathan's injury, which had begun bleeding again with the exertion. They had covered perhaps half the distance when a gunshot echoed through the tunnel behind them. Emma froze, grief washing over her. Another good man lost to the coalition's evil. "We have to keep moving," Nathan urged gently. "His sacrifice won't be in vain." They pressed on the tunnel, gradually widening as it followed the mountain's contours. After what seemed an eternity, they glimpsed natural light ahead, dawn breaking at the tunnel's exit. They emerged into a forested ravine, Crystal Creek gurgling nearby. The storm clouds had moved on, leaving the morning crisp and clear. Emma oriented herself using the peaks visible above the trees. "Helena is that way," she pointed. "About 20 miles as the crow flies." "And the Silver Creek mine?" Nathan asked. Emma consulted Grant's maps. 10 miles north of Helena, well off the main roads. They faced a critical decision: continue to Helena with Nathan's evidence or attempt to reach Margaret Hayes at the mine. Either choice carried tremendous risk. "October 13th, Nathan noted grimly. "We have 2 days before the assassination." Emma studied his face, seeing the toll the journey had taken. "Your wound is bleeding again. You need medical attention." "And your mother needs rescue," Nathan countered. "I won't ask you to choose between family and duty." "Perhaps we don't have to." Emma traced a route on the map. "There's a telegraph station at Juniper Creek, 8 miles from here. We could send your information to Helena, then proceed to the mine." Nathan considered this. A telegram alone may not be convincing. The physical evidence would be more compelling. "But if we're captured or killed trying to reach Helena directly, the information dies with us," Emma reasoned. This way, at least, the warning reaches the association. The logic was sound. They adjusted their route toward Juniper Creek, moving as quickly as Nathan's condition allowed. The day warmed slightly, though snow still threatened in the heavy clouds that periodically obscured the sun. By midday, they reached a vantage point overlooking the valley. In the distance, Helena was visible, the territorial capital spreading along the valley floor. Closer, perhaps 3 miles away, stood the Juniper Creek settlement, little more than a trading post stage stop, and the crucial telegraph office. "We should approach carefully," Nathan advised. "Wallace may have alerted his people to watch for us." They descended cautiously, using forest cover where possible. As they drew closer to Juniper Creek, they observed the small settlement through Nathan's field glasses. Nothing seemed amiss, the usual activity of a frontier outpost, wagons and horsemen coming and going. "Looks normal," Emma observed. "Too normal," Nathan replied, focusing on the telegraph office. "No guards, no watchers. After the efforts they've made to stop us, they wouldn't leave such an obvious route uncovered." Emma realized he was right. "It's a trap." They retreated to discuss options, finding shelter in a small cave as light snow began to fall. "We need a diversion," Nathan suggested. "Something to draw attention while one of us reaches the telegraph." "Or a disguise," Emma countered, an idea forming. "The stagecoach arrives at 2 o'clock. Passengers disembark, new ones board. In the confusion—" Nathan nodded slowly. "It could work. But which of us goes—" "Me," Emma said firmly. "I'm not injured, and no one there knows me by sight." "It's too dangerous," Nathan protested. "If they've distributed descriptions—" "I'm a woman," Emma reminded him with a hint of irony. "Half the time men don't truly see us, and I can change my appearance." From her pack, she withdrew a shawl and a small jar of salve used for chapped skin. With these simple tools, she transformed herself. Hair arranged differently, complexion artificially reddened, as if wind-burned posture altered to suggest age. "A frontier widow," she explained. "Invisible and forgettable." Nathan reluctantly agreed to the plan. He wrote out the telegram in code names, dates, the assassination details, and provided Emma with money for the transmission. "I'll create a distraction on the far side of the settlement," he told her. "Something to draw any watchers away from the telegraph office. Wait for it, then move quickly." They timed their approach to coincide with the stagecoach's arrival. Nathan circled wide to position himself, while Emma moved closer to the road, joining other travelers walking toward the settlement. Right on schedule, the stagecoach thundered in, bringing the usual flurry of activity. As passengers disembarked and luggage was unloaded, Emma observed the telegraph office. A single operator was visible through the window, but no obvious guards. Then came Nathan's distraction, a small explosion at the settlement's edge, followed by shouts and the sight of smoke. Most of the settlement's occupants rushed toward the commotion, including 2 men who had been loitering near the telegraph office. Emma moved swiftly, entering the office, while the operator was distracted by the window view of the excitement. She approached the counter, maintaining her widow's demeanor. "Urgent message to Helena," she explained, sliding the paper and money across. The operator turned, startled. "Ma'am, there's some trouble outside. Perhaps you should—" "My son is ill in Helena," Emma interrupted, injecting desperation into her voice. "The doctor said to telegraph ahead for medicine. Please, it can't wait." The man's hesitation dissolved in the face of her apparent distress. He turned to the telegraph, beginning to tap out the message. Emma watched anxiously as each word was transmitted, aware that every moment increased the danger. The message complete, the operator handed her a receipt. "Sent, ma'am. Hope your boy recovers." "Thank you." Emma managed her heart pounding as she turned to leave. She stepped outside just as shouts erupted from the direction of Nathan's distraction. Men were running, weapons drawn. Her disguise forgotten, Emma hurried toward their predetermined meeting place beyond the settlement. She found Nathan waiting in the shelter of pine trees, his expression tense. "Did it work?" "Message sent," Emma confirmed. "But something's wrong. They're searching for someone." "Time to disappear," Nathan decided. "The mine, next." Emma nodded, determination hardening her features. "Let's find my mother." As they moved deeper into the forest, snow began falling in earnest, obscuring their tracks, nature's assistance in their escape. Ahead lay the Silver Creek mine and Margaret Hayes, if she still lived. Behind them, the telegram sped toward Helena, carrying warning of the impending assassination. The pieces were in motion. The final confrontation approached, and Emma Hayes, daughter of Harold and Margaret, felt destiny drawing her forward toward truth, toward justice, and toward a family reunion 8 years overdue. Snow blanketed the Montana wilderness, transforming the rugged landscape into a pristine expanse of white. Emma Hayes and Nathan Reed made their way through deepening drifts, the forest providing intermittent shelter from the increasingly heavy snowfall. The October storm had arrived early, both blessing and curse, covering their tracks, but slowing their progress toward the Silver Creek mine. "We should reach the ridge by nightfall," Emma said, consulting Dr. Grant's maps. Her breath clouded in the frigid air, cheeks flushed from exertion and cold. "There's an abandoned hunter's cabin marked here. We can shelter there." Nathan nodded, conserving his strength. The wound in his side had partially reopened during their escape from Juniper Creek, forcing them to pause while Emma redressed it. Though he never complained, Emma could see the pain etching lines around his eyes, the careful way he moved to avoid aggravating the injury. They traveled in companionable silence, each lost in thought. Emma's mind continually returned to the photograph in her pocket. Her mother alive after all these years. The revelation had unleashed a storm of emotions, joy that Margaret lived, anger at the deception, fear for her current safety. And beneath it all, a childlike hope that perhaps her family wasn't as shattered as she'd believed. "Tell me about her," Nathan said, suddenly breaking the silence. "Your mother, what do you remember?" Emma's step faltered momentarily, surprised by the question. "She was vibrant, always in motion. She taught at the local school before I was old enough to attend. My father called her his force of nature." A smile touched her lips at the memory. "She would sing while doing household chores. Had a weakness for penny novels that my father pretended to disapprove of." "She sounds remarkable," Nathan observed. "She is," Emma corrected herself, still adjusting to the present tense. "I remember her teaching me to shoot when I was 12. Father thought I was too young, but Mother insisted every Hayes woman should know how to defend herself." The memory warmed her despite the biting cold. "I never understood how she could abandon that life, abandon me. Now I realize what it must have cost her to maintain her cover all these years. To stay away. Sacrifice runs in your family," Nathan noted quietly. They crested a small rise, the landscape opening before them, snow-covered valley giving way to distant mountains, the afternoon sun occasionally piercing the cloud cover to cast golden light across the white expanse. Emma paused momentarily, overwhelmed by the beauty and desolation. "I've spent 8 years building a life without them," she admitted. "First in Boston, then back here, teaching, surviving, never letting anyone close. And now? Now everything's changed." Nathan finished for her. Emma nodded, unable to articulate the magnitude of that change. In just 2 days, her understanding of her family, her past, and her place in Montana's future had been completely upended. They continued their journey as the short winter day began fading. The hunter's cabin appeared as darkness approached a simple one-room structure nearly hidden among towering pines. Nathan checked the perimeter while Emma examined the door for signs of recent entry. Finding none, they cautiously entered. The cabin was basic, but sound. A stone fireplace, crude bunk, small table, and shelves containing essential supplies maintained by the association. Emma quickly got a fire started, while Nathan secured the door and shuttered the single window. Warmth gradually filled the small space as they ate a sparse meal from their provisions. The howling wind outside emphasized the shelter's fragile security snow, occasionally blowing down the chimney to hiss in the flames. "The telegram should have reached Helena by now," Nathan said, studying Grant's maps by firelight. "If all goes well, the association members will be warned." "And if not?" Emma asked the question that had been haunting them both. Nathan's expression was grim. "Then we're the only ones who can prevent a massacre." The weight of that responsibility settled heavily between them. Emma retrieved her father's journal, paging through the coded entries. "There must be something here about the Silver Creek mine. Some weakness we can exploit." Nathan joined her at the small table, their shoulders nearly touching as they pored over the journal. The enforced proximity of their journey had created an easy companionship, a trust that felt both natural and surprising, given how recently they'd met. Here, Emma pointed to a page dated 3 months before Harold's death. These symbols match the mine's location on Grant's map. And these numbers, shift rotations, Nathan realized. Guard schedules. Your father was planning something at the mine. Emma flipped forward several pages. He mentions a secondary shaft repeatedly, and M confirms access through north face. Margaret, Nathan surmised. She was helping him plan an association raid on the mine. Which never happened because he was killed, Emma concluded. She traced the handwritten notes, imagining her father writing them, planning a rescue that he wouldn't live to execute. "If these schedules still hold, we might find a way in," Nathan finished. "A way to reach your mother." They worked late into the night, combining Harold's notes with Grant's more recent maps, developing a strategy for approaching the mine undetected. The plan that emerged was dangerous, relying heavily on outdated information and the element of surprise, but it was the best they could devise. Exhaustion eventually overcame them. Nathan took the first watch while Emma curled on the bunk, her father's journal clutched to her chest. Despite her racing mind, the day's exertions pulled her quickly into sleep. She dreamed of her childhood home, not the cabin, but their house in town. Her mother was there brushing Emma's hair before school, humming softly. The scene shifted, and they were in her father's study, Harold Hayes showing her the constellations through his telescope. "Remember, Emma," he was saying, "even in darkest night, the stars guide us home." She woke with tears on her cheeks, the cabin dark except for the dying fire's embers. Nathan sat by the window, a silhouette against the faint moonlight now filtering through breaking clouds. "You should sleep," she said, sitting up. "I'll take watch." Nathan turned his face, half illuminated by the glowing coals. "Dawn's only a couple hours away. I'm fine." But Emma saw the exhaustion in his posture, the way he held himself carefully to minimize pain. "You're not fine. You need rest to heal." After a moment's hesitation, Nathan nodded, relinquishing his post. As he passed her on the way to the bunk, his hand briefly touched her shoulder, a simple gesture of trust that affected Emma more than she expected. She took his place by the window, watching moonlight transform the snow-covered forest into a silvery dreamscape. The storm had passed, stars emerging in the clearing sky. Emma found the North Star, remembering her father's lessons about navigation, about finding one's way home. Her thoughts drifted to Nathan Reed, the man sleeping a few feet away. In 2 days, he had become someone she trusted implicitly, a partnership forged in danger and shared purpose. There was something about him that resonated with her, perhaps because he'd known her father, perhaps because they were both children of the association shaped by its ideals and its losses. Dawn arrived with crystalline clarity, the rising sun setting the snow-blanketed world ablaze with light. Emma prepared a small meal, while Nathan studied the maps one final time. The mine is approximately 7 miles northwest, he determined. If we maintain good pace, we should reach it by mid-afternoon. And then, Emma asked the question hanging between them. Nathan met her gaze directly. And then we find your mother, and get out all 3 of us. The simplicity of his statement belied the danger of their mission, but Emma appreciated his certainty. Together, they gathered their supplies and departed the cabin, stepping into a wilderness transformed by the overnight snow. Their progress was steady, following game trails where possible to avoid the deepest drifts. The cold was intense, but manageable. With movement, their breath forming clouds that dissipated in the brilliant sunshine. By midday, they approached a ridge that would provide their first view of Silver Creek Valley. They climbed cautiously, using trees for cover, until they reached a vantage point. Below them, the valley spread like a white canvas, broken by the dark line of the creek, and nestled against the northern slope, the Silver Creek Mine. Even from a distance, they could see it was no abandoned operation. Smoke rose from several buildings, and figures moved about the compound. A road led from the mine entrance to join the main valley thoroughfare tracks in the snow, indicating recent wagon passage. More activity than I expected, Nathan murmured, studying the scene through his field glasses. Emma took her turn with the glasses, examining the compound. 6 buildings, dormitory offices, a building stable guardhouse, and what appears to be a mill. Main shaft entrance there with secondary shafts, likely here and here. She indicated spots where snow had melted in patterns, suggesting underground heat. Your father's notes mentioned access through the north face, Nathan reminded her. That would be on the far side, away from the main compound. Emma adjusted the glasses, scanning the rocky slope above the mine. There, she pointed to a barely visible opening half concealed by pine trees. That could be our entrance. They retreated from the ridge to finalize their approach. The direct route would take them across open terrain too exposed for safety. Instead, they would circle to the north, using the forest for cover, and approach the secondary shaft from above. We should wait for darkness, Nathan suggested. Less activity, better cover. Emma nodded in agreement. We'll need to find shelter until then. They located a small rock overhang a mile from the mine, providing minimal protection, but keeping them hidden from valley observers. As they waited through the long afternoon, Emma found herself increasingly tense, emotions churning at the prospect of reuniting with her mother after 8 years. What if she doesn't recognize me? The question escaped before Emma could contain it. Nathan studied her face with gentle understanding. She will. I was 16 when she left. A child, really, Emma continued, voicing fears she'd scarcely acknowledged to herself. Now I'm a grown woman, a stranger. You're her daughter, Nathan said simply. That transcends time and circumstance. Emma smiled faintly at his certainty. You sound like my father. He always had that same unshakable faith in fundamental truths. As twilight approached, they prepared for the final phase of their journey. Emma checked her revolver, ensuring it was loaded and accessible. Nathan similarly verified his weapons, grimacing slightly as the movements pulled at his wound. Your side is troubling you, Emma observed. I'll manage, Nathan assured her. "We've come too far to turn back now." The sun dipped behind the western mountains, shadows lengthening across the valley. They began their approach, moving from tree to tree, alert for patrols or sentries. The temperature dropped rapidly with sunset, their footsteps crunching softly in the refreezing snow. They reached the northern slope without incident, the forest providing cover almost to the secondary shaft entrance. Only the final 100 yards presented a risk, an exposed stretch of rocky ground between the trees and the mine opening. As full darkness descended, they paused at the forest edge, watching for movement near the shaft. All seemed quiet, the main compound's lights visible only as a faint glow beyond the ridge. "Ready," Nathan whispered. Emma nodded, steeling herself. Together, they darted across the open ground, reaching the shaft entrance without detection. The opening was small, barely large enough for a person to enter, and partially blocked by fallen rock. Nathan cleared the debris silently, while Emma kept watch. Soon they had created sufficient space to enter, revealing a narrow tunnel leading into darkness. Emma produced a small lantern from her pack, shielding it to produce minimal light as they ventured inside. The tunnel showed signs of hasty abandonment, tools scattered about, support beams occasionally cracked. They proceeded cautiously, following the shaft as it descended into the mountain. "This must connect to the main workings," Nathan whispered. "Your mother's notes said she could access the entire mine through the north face." They continued downward, the air growing warmer and damper. Occasionally they heard distant sounds, machinery voices indicating the mine's active sections weren't far away. After approximately 20 minutes, they reached a junction where their tunnel intersected a larger, well-maintained shaft. Emma consulted the rough map they'd developed. "We should be near the secondary operations area. If the schedule holds, it should be minimally staffed at night." They extinguished their lantern before proceeding, using only occasional matches to check their position. The main shaft was dimly lit by widely spaced oil lamps, allowing them to move with greater speed, but increasing the risk of discovery. At another junction, they paused to orient themselves. According to their information, the administrative offices, where Margaret might be found, were located in the eastern section. They turned in that direction, moving silently through the eerily quiet tunnels. Emma's heart pounded with each step, the reality of their situation becoming increasingly tangible. Somewhere in this labyrinth was her mother, a woman she'd mourned and missed for 8 years now, potentially within reach. They rounded a bend and froze. Ahead, a guard sat dozing outside a wooden door rifle across his lap. Nathan gestured for Emma to remain still while he crept forward. With practiced efficiency, he subdued the guard without a sound, lowering the unconscious man to the ground. Emma joined him, examining the door. "Locked," she whispered, after trying the handle. Nathan searched the guard, locating a ring of keys. The third key turned smoothly in the lock, allowing them to enter what appeared to be a records room. Shelves lined the walls, filled with ledgers and documents. A desk occupied the center of the space maps spread across its surface. Coalition records, Nathan realized, quickly examining the materials. Mining claims, property transfers, financial transactions. Evidence of their operations. Emma discovered a locked cabinet, which another of the guard's keys opened. Inside were personnel files, including one labeled Hayes Margaret. With trembling fingers, Emma opened the file, finding detailed records of her mother's activities within the coalition. According to the documents, Margaret held a position as Wallace's administrative assistant, with access to his correspondence and meetings. "She's been at the heart of their operation," Emma whispered, a mixture of pride and fear coloring her voice. "Recording everything." A notation on the final page sent ice through her veins. Surveillance increased as of October 10th, restricted to compound during sensitive operations. They suspect her, Nathan concluded. We need to move quickly. A building schematic in the file indicated that executive quarters were located on the upper level of the main building where Wallace and his inner circle maintained offices and living spaces. If Margaret was under surveillance, she would likely be there. They exited the records room, securing the door behind them and concealing the unconscious guard in a supply closet. According to the schematic, they could reach the main building through a connecting tunnel that led from the mine to the administrative complex. The tunnel was better maintained and more brightly lit, forcing them to proceed with extreme caution. Twice they had to hide as workers passed, pressing into alcoves until the way was clear. Eventually, they reached a staircase leading upward, presumably to the main building. We're entering their stronghold, Nathan cautioned. From here, we'll likely encounter armed guards. Emma checked her revolver. Then we'll need to be smarter, not just stronger. At the top of the stairs, a door opened into a well-appointed hallway, a stark contrast to the rough mine tunnels. Gas lamps in sconces illuminated polished wooden floors and papered walls. It might have been a fine Helena hotel, if not for the armed man stationed at the far end. We need a distraction, Emma whispered. Nathan nodded, then moved back down several steps. With careful aim, he threw a small rock down the mine tunnel, creating a clattering that echoed loudly. The guard immediately turned toward the sound, moving to investigate. They slipped into the hallway, ducking into the nearest room, a small library, before the guard returned. Through a crack in the door, Emma watched him resume his position, now looking more alert and suspicious. We need to know which room is my mother's, Emma whispered, without alerting the entire compound. Nathan considered their options. The guard might have that information. Or we create a situation where she comes to us, Emma suggested. She glanced around the library, noting a small bell on the desk likely used to summon staff. Too risky, Nathan cautioned. We don't know who else might respond. Emma's gaze fell on a book lying open on a side table, a woman's novel, the kind her mother had favored. Beside it, a cup of tea gone cold. She was here, Emma realized. Recently. A soft noise at the door froze them both. The handle turned slowly, the door beginning to open. Nathan drew his weapon as Emma pressed herself against the wall behind the door. A woman entered, slender, gray-streaked auburn hair pinned neatly at the nape of her neck. She moved directly to the book, seemingly intent on retrieving it, unaware of their presence. Emma's breath caught in her throat. Even from behind, she recognized the graceful posture, the distinctive way the woman held her head. Before Nathan could react, Emma stepped forward. "Mother," she whispered. Margaret Hayes turned sharply, a hand flying to her throat. For one eternal moment, mother and daughter stared at each other across 8 years of separation. Then Margaret's composure shattered her eyes, filling with tears. "Emma!" She breathed disbelief and joy mingling in her voice. "My God, Emma!" They moved together, as if drawn by invisible forces, embracing with such fierce emotion that words became unnecessary. Emma buried her face in her mother's shoulder, inhaling the familiar scent, lavender and paper, that had haunted her dreams for years. "How?" Margaret finally managed, holding Emma at arm's length to study her face. "How are you here? We came to find you," Emma explained, gesturing to Nathan, who had secured the door. "To bring you home." Margaret's gaze shifted to Nathan, recognition dawning. "Marshall Reed, the association sent you," "In a manner of speaking," Nathan replied. "We've learned about the assassination plot against association members in Helena. We're here to stop it and to get you out safely." Margaret's expression grew grave. "Then you know everything is happening tomorrow, October 15th, Father's death anniversary." Emma nodded. No coincidence. No, Margaret agreed, a shadow passing across her features. Victor chose the date deliberately. Symbolic victory over the association. She moved to the window, checking that the curtains were securely drawn before continuing. You've taken a terrible risk coming here. The compound is on high alert. Wallace leaves for Helena in the morning with Sheriff Miller and a dozen men. What exactly is their plan? Nathan asked. The territorial court is meeting at noon, Margaret explained. All remaining association judges and officials will be present. Wallace has men positioned throughout the building. At a signal, they'll lock the doors and eliminate everyone inside. The cold precision of the plan sent a chill through Emma. How do we stop it? The signal is critical, Margaret revealed. Wallace will deliver it personally, a telegram, to be sent from Helena's central office at precisely 11:45. If the telegram doesn't go through, his men won't act. Then we intercept Wallace before he can send it, Nathan concluded. Margaret shook her head. Not that simple. Miller has a backup signal if Wallace fails. Both must be neutralized. They quickly shared the events of the past 2 days, Dr. Grant's death, the telegram sent from Juniper Creek, their journey to the mine. Margaret listened intently, pride evident, as Emma described their escape from Copper Creek. Your father would be so proud of you, Margaret said softly when they finished. She touched Emma's cheek gently, a mother's gesture that nearly undid Emma's composure. You've become exactly the woman he hoped you'd be. I thought you abandoned us. Emma admitted the hurt of those years surfacing despite herself. For so long, I believed you'd chosen to leave. Pain flickered across Margaret's features. That was the hardest part, knowing you believed that. But it was necessary. Your safety depended on complete separation. And now, Emma asked, will you come with us? A shadow crossed Margaret's face. It's complicated. My position here is precarious. Wallace has grown suspicious. He's restricted my movements had me followed. I believe he's planning to eliminate me after tomorrow's operation. All the more reason to leave immediately, Nathan insisted. If I disappear tonight, he'll know something's wrong, Margaret countered. The assassination plan might be accelerated or changed. We lose our advantage. Emma recognized the strategic thinking that had kept her mother alive in enemy territory for 8 years. Then what do you suggest? Margaret considered briefly. I'll continue as normal until morning. When Wallace departs for Helena, I'll create a diversion here at the mine, something to prevent any backup plans from being executed. You two intercept Wallace in Helena and stop the signal. And Sheriff Miller, Nathan questioned. I'll provide his likely route and timing, Margaret promised. But you'll need help in Helena. Is there anyone there you can trust? Nathan nodded. If our telegram reached them, association members will be on alert. We can coordinate once we arrive. They spent the next hour developing their plan, Margaret providing critical details about Wallace's security travel plans and the coalition's structure. Emma marveled at her mother's calm efficiency, the strategic mind that had enabled her to survive deep undercover for so many years. You'll need to leave through the north shaft, Margaret advised as they concluded. I can create a distraction to get you past the guard. Meet me at Helena's South Church at 2 o'clock tomorrow. If all goes well, we'll finally be free of this. She embraced Emma again, this time lingering. I've missed so much of your life, she whispered. I want to know everything, your studies in Boston, your teaching, your dreams. We'll have time, Emma promised, trying to believe it herself. Once this is finished. Margaret turned to Nathan. Take care of her. And yourself. Harold thought highly of you, said you had your father's integrity. I'll get her to Helena safely, Nathan assured her. Margaret nodded, composing herself visibly. Wait here. When you hear commotion in the hallway, move quickly for the stairs. The guard will be occupied." She kissed Emma's forehead one last time, then slipped from the room, leaving behind the scent of lavender and decades of secrets. Emma stared at the closed-door emotions threatening to overwhelm her. "She's remarkable," Nathan said quietly. Emma nodded, unable to speak past the knot in her throat. After a lifetime believing her mother had abandoned them, the truth was almost too much to process, that Margaret Hayes had sacrificed everything, including her relationship with her daughter, to fight for justice. Minutes later, shouting erupted in the hallway, Margaret's distraction. They moved swiftly, finding the corridor empty, as guards responded to what sounded like a fire alarm in another wing. The staircase to the mine tunnels was unguarded, allowing them to descend quickly into the darkness. They navigated the tunnels with greater confidence, now Margaret's directions guiding them past potential patrols. Within half an hour they had reached the northern shaft and emerged into the frigid night air. The sky had cleared completely, stars blazing overhead with cold brilliance. They moved quickly into the forest's protection, putting distance between themselves and the mine before pausing to orient themselves. "Helena is approximately 15 miles southwest," Nathan calculated. "If we travel through the night, we can reach it by dawn." Emma nodded, determination overriding exhaustion. "Then let's not waste time." They set a grueling pace through the snow-covered wilderness, following game trails where possible, breaking their own path where necessary. The night deepened around them, the temperature dropping mercilessly, but neither suggested stopping. Too much depended on their reaching Helena before Wallace could execute his plan. During a brief rest to consult their maps, Emma noticed Nathan wincing as he adjusted his pack. "Your wound is troubling you again," she observed. "It's nothing," he dismissed, but Emma insisted on checking the bandage. In the moonlight she could see fresh blood staining the white cloth. "This is far from nothing," she admonished, removing supplies from her pack. "You've torn the stitches." Nathan submitted to her ministrations with reluctant grace. As Emma cleaned and redressed the wound, she noted how his body had thinned during their journey, the rigors of their flight taking a physical toll despite his stoic demeanor. "You should have said something sooner," she chided gently. "There were more important matters," he replied simply. Emma secured the fresh bandage, her fingers lingering briefly on his skin. The connection between them had evolved during their shared ordeal, a partnership born of danger but sustained by something deeper. Trust, certainly, but also understanding. They were both children of the association, shaped by its ideals and sacrifices. "Thank you," Nathan said quietly as she finished, "for everything." Emma met his gaze in the moonlight, seeing warmth there despite the cold surrounding them. For a suspended moment, something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement of feelings neither was ready to name. The moment broke as a distant wolf howled, reminding them of their vulnerable position. They resumed their journey, the physical challenge of traversing snowy terrain providing distraction from emotional complexities. Near dawn, they crested a rise and saw Helena spread before them in the valley, the territorial capital still slumbering, lights glowing faintly in the pre-dawn darkness. They had made it, but the most dangerous part of their mission lay ahead. "Wallace will arrive by mid-morning," Emma recounted from Margaret's information. "He'll proceed directly to the governor's mansion for a meeting, then to the courthouse for the session at noon. The telegraph office is our primary target," Nathan confirmed. "We need to secure it before 11:45 to prevent the signal." They descended toward the city, their exhaustion momentarily forgotten in the focus of approaching confrontation. Helena represented both danger and hope, the place where justice might finally be achieved for Harold Hayes, for William Reed, and for all the association members who had died fighting the coalition. As the first light of October 15th broke over the Montana mountains, Emma Hayes and Nathan Reed entered Helena with a singular purpose to prevent a massacre and bring down the corrupt empire that had destroyed their families. Behind them lay days of danger and revelation. Ahead waited a final confrontation with the architects of Montana's corruption. And somewhere in the mountains, Margaret Hayes prepared her own strike against the coalition that had stolen 8 years of her life. The pieces were in motion, the players converging for a day of reckoning long overdue. Emma touched the silver star pendant beneath her collar, her father's legacy, the symbol of everything she fought for. "For you, Father," she whispered to the dawn. "Today we finish what you started." Nathan nodded in solemn agreement, his hand briefly covering hers where it rested on the pendant. Together they moved into the awakening city, two warriors in a battle for Montana's soul and for the future they might share when justice was finally served. The morning sun illuminated Helena's streets as citizens began their daily routines, unaware of the shadow hanging over their territorial capital. Emma and Nathan made their way cautiously toward the center of town, their trail-worn appearance drawing occasional curious glances. "We need information," Nathan said as they paused in a small alley. "And supplies." Emma nodded in agreement. "And to connect with any association members who received our telegram." They decided to separate briefly, Nathan seeking out association contacts, while Emma purchased supplies and fresh clothing to help them blend into the city environment. They arranged to meet at the South Church in 1 hour, both acutely aware of the risks of separation after days of watching each other's backs. Emma completed her errands efficiently, acquiring food bandages and a simple dress to replace her trail-worn clothing. As she crossed the town square, she noticed increased security around government buildings, territorial police patrolling in pairs, additional guards at entrances. The association had clearly received their warning and taken precautions, but would it be enough against Wallace's carefully orchestrated plan? At the appointed time, she arrived at the church to find Nathan already waiting in the small courtyard. He had changed into fresh clothing as well, his appearance transformed from fugitive to respectable citizen, though the alertness in his eyes remained unchanged. "Any luck?" Emma asked as she joined him. Nathan nodded. "I made contact with Judge Morrison, one of your father's colleagues, and a senior association member. He's implemented security measures for the court session, but Wallace's influence runs deep. There are likely coalition sympathizers among the guards." "What about the telegraph office?" "Association members are watching it, but discreetly. We can't simply shut it down without alerting Wallace's people that we know their plan." Emma considered this. "Then we need to let events proceed normally until the last moment, then intercept Wallace before he can send the signal." "Precisely," Nathan agreed. "Morrison is arranging a secure location for us near the courthouse. We can monitor movements from there." They proceeded to the address Nathan had been given, a watchmaker's shop across from the territorial courthouse. The proprietor, an elderly man named Franklin, greeted them with the quiet efficiency of one long accustomed to association business. "Upstairs room has the view you'll need," he informed them, leading the way to a second-floor space that indeed provided an excellent vantage point of both the courthouse entrance and the street leading to the telegraph office. The room was simply furnished but well prepared for their needs: food, water, weapons, and even a medical kit. Emma immediately insisted on properly treating Nathan's wound now that they had adequate supplies and light. As she worked, Franklin provided an update on Helena's situation. "Governor's been informed discreetly. Extraterritorial marshals brought in overnight positioned inside the courthouse. We've identified several of Wallace's men in town already, but they're being watched." "And Sheriff Miller?" Nathan inquired. "No sign yet," Franklin reported. "But we've got eyes on all roads into town." Emma finished bandaging Nathan's side, noting with concern that the wound showed signs of infection despite their care. "You need proper medical attention," she murmured. "After today," Nathan replied, the determination in his voice brooking no argument. Franklin departed to maintain his shop, leaving them to establish a watch rotation. From their window, they observed the increasing activity around the courthouse as the morning advanced. Territorial officials arrived in a steady stream, security checking each entrant carefully. "Wallace will need to arrive soon if he's to make his meeting with the governor," Emma noted, checking the clock on the mantel. It was approaching 10 o'clock. Nathan nodded, his attention focused on the street below. "Miller is the wild card. If he's carrying a backup signal, Mother will handle the mine end," Emma reminded him, though uncertainty crept into her voice. Margaret Hayes had spent 8 years maintaining her cover. Would today be the day it finally failed her? At 10:30, a commotion in the street drew their attention. A well-appointed carriage had arrived, flanked by mounted men. From it emerged Victor Wallace, immaculate in a black coat and hat, his silver beard catching the morning light. "Wallace!" Nathan confirmed, watching through field glasses as the banker was greeted deferentially by courthouse guards. Emma studied the man who had orchestrated her father's murder, who had held Montana in his corrupt grip for decades. In his distinguished appearance and confident bearing, she saw nothing of the evil he represented, a reminder that monsters often wore the faces of respected citizens. Wallace proceeded into the courthouse, 2 guards remaining with his carriage. Emma and Nathan exchanged glances, mentally tracking the timeline. The court session would begin at noon. The signal was to be sent at 11:45. They had just over an hour. Still no sign of Miller, Nathan noted with concern. "He should have arrived with Wallace." Emma considered this deviation from their expected plan. "Perhaps he's coming separately, or already here." The minutes ticked by with excruciating slowness. At 11:15, Wallace emerged from the courthouse, consulting his pocket watch, before starting toward the telegraph office exactly as Margaret had predicted. "It's time," Nathan said, checking his revolver. They descended quickly to the street, timing their emergence to intercept Wallace's path. The banker walked briskly, accompanied by a single guard. Nathan and Emma approached from different angles, converging just as Wallace reached the corner near the telegraph office. "Mr. Wallace," Nathan called, causing the man to turn. "A moment of your time." Recognition flickered across Wallace's features as he identified Nathan. His hand moved subtly, alerting his guard. "Marshal Reed, you're remarkably resilient for a dead man." "A family trait," Nathan replied evenly, his hand near his concealed weapon. "As is pursuing justice." Wallace's gaze shifted to Emma, confusion giving way to stunned recognition. "Miss Hayes, you're the spitting image of your mother." His eyes narrowed. "This explains much." Emma felt cold fury rising within her, standing before her father's murderer, hearing him speak so casually of her mother. "It's over, Wallace. We know about the assassination plan. Association members are prepared." The banker's composure never wavered. "My dear, you've clearly been misinformed. I'm simply sending a business telegram." "We've seen the evidence," Nathan countered. "Your entire operation has been exposed." Wallace smiled thinly. "Evidence gathered by a fugitive and a schoolteacher, hardly compelling in a territorial court." His guard moved closer, hand on his weapon. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have business to attend to." As Wallace attempted to step around them, Emma moved directly into his path. "Justice for Harold Hayes," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart, "and for William Reed, and for every person your coalition has harmed." Something dangerous flashed in Wallace's eyes. Your father was a fool who didn't understand progress. Montana's future requires strong leadership, not idealistic judges playing at righteousness. You'll never send that signal, Nathan stated flatly. Wallace's smile turned predatory. You assume there's only one signal. He glanced meaningfully toward the courthouse, where the clock showed 11:30. Emma felt a chill of realization. Miller, he's already inside. The momentary distraction was all Wallace's guard needed. He drew his weapon with practiced speed, but Nathan was faster. A shot rang out in the quiet street, the guard clutching his arm as his gun clattered to the cobblestones. Wallace used the chaos to break away, running toward the telegraph office. Nathan pursued, while Emma turned toward the courthouse, understanding with terrible clarity that stopping Wallace wouldn't be enough. They needed to find Miller before he could activate the backup plan. Emma raced across the street, her mind calculating the quickest route to intercept Miller, who would likely be positioned near the main courtroom. The courthouse guards, alerted by the gunshot, moved to secure the entrance. Emma slipped through a side door, her teacher's appearance causing less alarm than Nathan's armed pursuit would have. Inside, the marble halls echoed with the sounds of the court session preparing to convene. Officials in formal attire moved purposefully, territorial police stationed at intervals. Emma searched frantically for Miller among the crowd, knowing his sheriff's uniform would make him stand out. Then she spotted him, not in uniform, but dressed as a court official, moving toward the main chamber where judges would soon gather. His hand rested inside his jacket, likely on a concealed weapon. Emma had no direct authority to stop him, no weapon drawn to force compliance. Instead, she relied on the element of surprise. "Sheriff Miller," she called clearly, causing heads to turn. "Or should I address you as Daniel Hayes?" Miller froze, turning slowly to face her. Shock registered as he recognized her. "Emma." "Hello, Uncle," she replied deliberately, loud enough for nearby officials to hear. "Preparing to honor my father's memory with more murder." Confusion spread through the onlookers. A territorial marshal stepped forward, hand moving to his weapon as he sensed the tension. "This woman is disturbed," Miller attempted, regaining composure. "A former student with delusions." "I have evidence proving you murdered Territorial Judge Harold Hayes," Emma continued steadily, "and that you're here today to continue the Gold Coalition's elimination of honest officials." The marshal was fully alert now, other security personnel moving to surround them. "What's this about, miss?" "Ask him about the signal he's carrying," Emma challenged. "The one meant to lock this courthouse and execute everyone inside." Miller's expression darkened, his hand tightening on whatever lay beneath his jacket. For a moment, Emma thought he might attempt to complete his mission regardless of the suspicion now directed his way. Then, with the calculated precision of a man accustomed to adapting to changing circumstances, he bolted for a side corridor. "Stop him!" the marshal ordered immediately, giving chase. Emma followed her knowledge of the courthouse layout, gleaned from childhood visits with her father, guiding her through a shortcut that allowed her to intercept Miller at a rear staircase. He nearly collided with her, cursing in surprise. "Your father always said you were too clever for your own good," Miller snarled, drawing a pistol. "Just like him." Emma stood her ground, blocking his escape route. "Why, Uncle? He was your brother. He trusted you." A complex emotion flickered across Miller's features, something like regret, quickly subsumed by hardened resolve. Harold never understood what it takes to build something in this territory. He and his precious association would have kept Montana weak, ruled by Eastern interests. "So you killed him," Emma stated flatly. "Your own blood." Miller's jaw tightened. Wallace pulled the trigger. I simply provided the opportunity. Footsteps pounded down the corridor, the marshal and his men closing in. Miller glanced behind him, calculating odds that were rapidly diminishing. "You won't leave this building alive if you continue," Emma warned. "Surrender now, testify against Wallace, and perhaps justice will be tempered with mercy." For a brief moment, Emma thought she saw the uncle she remembered from childhood, the man who had taught her to fish, who had brought her candy from Helena. Then his expression hardened, decision made. "Hayes family and their damned principles," he muttered, raising his weapon, not at Emma, but at his own temple. "No!" Emma lunged forward, but the shot rang out before she could reach him. Miller crumpled to the floor as the marshals rounded the corner, weapons drawn. Emma stood frozen, staring at the man who had been her uncle, her father's brother, and ultimately his betrayer. The complex tangle of family loyalty and betrayal left her momentarily numb, even as the marshals secured the scene and questioned her. She answered mechanically, explaining Miller's role in the assassination plot, directing them to search him for the signal device. They found it a small red handkerchief that, when displayed, would have triggered Wallace's men positioned throughout the courthouse. Outside, she learned that Nathan had prevented Wallace from sending his telegraph, though the banker had escaped in the confusion. Association members were now rounding up identified coalition supporters. Throughout Helena, the assassination plot thoroughly disrupted. Emma made her way back to the watchmaker's shop, where she found Nathan waiting, his expression lighting with relief at her appearance. "Wallace got away," he reported grimly. "Heading back toward the mine, presumably." "Miller is dead," Emma replied, the words hollow in her mouth. "By his own hand." Nathan's expression softened with understanding. "I'm sorry, Emma. Whatever he became, he was still your family." The simple acknowledgement of this complexity broke something in Emma's carefully maintained composure. The events of the past days, finding her mother alive, confronting her uncle's betrayal, the constant danger and revelation overwhelmed her defenses. She sank into a chair, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Nathan knelt before her, his hands gently covering hers. "It's over now. The association is safe. Your father's work continues." Emma nodded, drawing strength from his presence. "Not quite over. Wallace is heading back to the mine, where my mother is." Concern sharpened Nathan's features. "We need to warn her. If Wallace realizes his plan has failed, she's in terrible danger," Emma finished, rising with renewed determination. "We need to reach Silver Creek immediately." Franklin provided horses from association resources, and within half an hour they were galloping from Helena, pushing their mounts as hard as they dared on the snow-covered roads. The urgency of their mission drove them forward despite exhaustion and injury. The afternoon sun cast long shadows as they raced toward Silver Creek Mine, both aware they were engaged in a desperate contest, not just to warn Margaret, but to reach her before Wallace could enact whatever revenge his defeated ambition might demand. Emma's thoughts turned to her mother, imagining her preparing her promised diversion, unaware that Wallace was returning with murder in his heart. After 8 years of separation, Emma might lose her mother, just as they'd found each other again, a cruel twist she could not accept. "We'll reach her in time," Nathan assured her, reading her fear. "Your mother has survived 8 years in the lion's den. She won't be easily caught off guard." Emma nodded, clinging to this hope, as they rode toward a final confrontation with the man who had destroyed her family once, and now threatened to do so again. Behind them, Helena was secure, the association preserved. Ahead, Margaret Hayes awaited rescue or doom, depending on whose arrival came first, her daughters or her enemies. The race against Victor Wallace had begun with Margaret's life, and the final justice for Harold Hayes hanging in the balance. The afternoon sun hung low over the western mountains as Emma Hayes and Nathan Reed approached Silver Creek Mine. They had pushed their horses to the limits of endurance, alternating between gallop and trot, when the terrain allowed. Emma's muscles ached from the punishing pace, but fear for her mother drove her forward relentlessly. Wallace had at least an hour's head start, Nathan calculated grimly as they crested a ridge overlooking the valley. If he rode straight through, Emma refused to complete the thought. Instead, she studied the mine compound below. From their vantage point, everything appeared normal workers moving between buildings, smoke rising from chimneys. No signs of alarm or unusual activity. She may not even know Wallace is returning, Emma said, the worry evident in her voice. Nathan adjusted his field glasses, scanning the compound methodically. Main building seems quiet. No extra guards or movement. That could be good or bad, Emma replied, if she's maintaining her cover. Their plan had assumed Margaret would create a diversion at the mine after Wallace's departure for Helena, then meet them at the church. But with Wallace returning unexpectedly and the assassination plot thwarted, all assumptions were rendered useless. We can't approach directly, Nathan decided, lowering the glasses. Too many workers, too exposed. Emma nodded in agreement. The north shaft again. It's our best option, Nathan confirmed, but Wallace may have alerted the guards to watch for us. They retreated from the ridge, circling wide to approach the mine from the north as before. The journey took precious time each minute, weighing on Emma as she imagined her mother's precarious position. Would Margaret sense the danger in time? Would her 8 years of careful deception protect her, or had Wallace harbored suspicions that today's events would confirm? By the time they reached the forest edge near the secondary shaft, dusk was approaching. The mine's day shift would be ending soon, bringing a flurry of activity that might provide cover or additional witnesses. We wait for the shift change, Nathan suggested, reading Emma's impatience. Less chance of being spotted during the transition. Emma nodded reluctantly, knowing he was right, but hating the delay. They concealed themselves among the trees, watching the compound and planning their approach. Emma removed her father's journal from her pack, paging through the entries about the mine's layout, searching for any detail that might help them reach her mother quickly once inside. My father made these notes just weeks before he died, she observed quietly. He was planning to extract her then. Nathan studied the pages with her. The association must have considered it too risky after his death. Without Harold coordinating from outside, she was trapped, Emma finished. For 8 more years. The realization deepened her resolve. After nearly a decade of separation and sacrifice, she would not lose her mother now, not when they were so close to reunion and justice. As twilight gathered, the mine's whistle sounded, signaling the end of the day shift. Workers began emerging from the main shaft, heading toward the dormitory, or the road leading to town. The changing of guards followed new men taking up positions around the compound's perimeter. Now, Nathan decided, as the activity reached its peak. They moved swiftly across the open ground to the secondary shaft entrance, reaching it without detection. The tunnel appeared undisturbed since their last visit, suggesting Wallace hadn't thought to secure this access point yet. Once inside, they lit a small shielded lantern, proceeding with greater urgency than caution. Every instinct told Emma they were racing against time, that Wallace wouldn't delay in confronting Margaret once he realized his plans had failed. They navigated the tunnels with the benefit of experience, reaching the main shaft area quickly. Unlike their previous visit, the mine was quieter now, the day's work complete. They encountered no one as they approached the passage leading to the administrative building. At the staircase, Nathan paused, drawing his revolver. From here, we're likely to encounter guards. Stay close. Emma checked her own weapon, the weight of her father's revolver reassuring in her hand. They ascended the stairs cautiously, Nathan leading. At the top, the door stood ajar, unusual compared to the secure entrance they'd encountered previously. Nathan signaled Emma to wait while he peered through the opening. After a moment, he pulled back, expression troubled. No guard. Hallway empty. The absence of security was concerning either an opportunity or a warning. They slipped into the corridor, moving silently toward the area where they had last seen Margaret. The building felt unnaturally quiet. The usual administrative activity ceased. They checked rooms systematically, finding most empty or abandoned in apparent haste, papers scattered, chairs overturned. Something had disrupted normal operations, causing workers to leave quickly. Wallace's return must have triggered this, Nathan whispered. But where is everyone? A muffled sound from farther down the hallway drew their attention, voices raised in anger. They moved toward the source, identifying Wallace's executive office as the location. The door was closed, but light showed beneath it, silhouettes moving within. They positioned themselves on either side, listening intently. Wallace's voice carried clearly, his cultured tone sharp with fury. 8 years, he was saying. 8 years you've been beneath my nose, feeding information to the association. I trusted you, Margaret. Emma's heart constricted at the confirmation Wallace knew. Her mother's cover was blown. You never trusted anyone, Victor. Margaret's voice replied, remarkably steady, despite her evident danger. That's why I was able to deceive you so long. You see only what serves your purposes. And Harold, did he know what risks he was taking with your life, sending his wife into the lion's den? It was my decision, Margaret countered. My duty. Duty, Wallace scoffed. You Hayes family and your righteousness. Harold died for it. Your brother-in-law died for it today, and now you'll join them. Emma tensed, preparing to burst through the door, but Nathan restrained her with a warning hand. More voices inside indicated they were outnumbered. They needed to assess the situation fully before acting. Miller is dead. Margaret's voice held genuine shock. How? By his own hand when your daughter exposed him, Wallace revealed. Yes, Margaret Emma was in Helena, working with Reed to undermine everything, like mother, like daughter. Emma imagined her mother absorbing this revelation, learning that her daughter was involved, that Daniel Miller had been exposed and taken his life. Yet Margaret's voice remained remarkably controlled. So your grand plan failed, she concluded. The association continues. A temporary setback, Wallace dismissed. Once I've eliminated the Hayes family entirely, I'll rebuild. Montana's future still belongs to the coalition. Through the doorway came sounds of movement, drawers opening, papers rustling. Wallace was collecting something. The ledgers won't help you, Margaret said. I've sent copies of everything to federal authorities. Your operations, your bribes, your murders, all documented. A sharp sound. A slap, followed by Margaret's small gasp of pain. Emma nearly moved then, but Nathan's grip tightened his expression, conveying the need for careful timing. Always one step ahead, Wallace said, voice cold with fury. Just like Harold, he couldn't leave well enough alone either. Had to pursue his precious justice. You were friends once, Margaret replied, her voice slightly breathless. You, Harold and Daniel. What happened to you, Victor? Power happened, Wallace answered simply. Harold never understood its necessity. He thought laws alone could build a territory. But Montana requires strength and sacrifice. Emma's hand tightened on her weapon. The conversation confirmed what they'd suspected. Wallace had ordered her father's death, betraying both friendship and justice for power. The man's callous rationalization made her blood boil. Bring her, Wallace commanded someone else in the room. We'll conclude this at the main shaft. Poetic, really, the final Hayes disappearing into the mine that built the coalition. Footsteps approached the door. Nathan pulled Emma quickly into an adjacent room, where they could observe without being seen. The office door opened, revealing Wallace, accompanied by two armed men, escorting Margaret between them. Her wrists were bound a bruise forming on her cheek, where Wallace had struck her, but she walked with head-high dignity intact. They moved down the corridor toward the mine entrance, Wallace leading with confident strides. Once the group passed, Nathan and Emma emerged, following at a careful distance. "They're taking her to the main shaft," Emma whispered. "Planning to kill her there." "More privacy, fewer potential witnesses," Nathan agreed grimly. "We need to get ahead of them, somehow set up an ambush." Emma recalled the mine layout from her father's notes. "There's a parallel tunnel that joins the main shaft halfway down. If we hurry through the secondary passages, we could intercept them." Without waiting for a response, she led the way back toward the mine entrance, then diverted into a smaller tunnel branching eastward. The passage was narrower, less maintained, requiring them to proceed bent nearly double in some sections. Emma navigated by memory and instinct, counting intersections, until they reached a junction she believed would connect to the main shaft. "This should lead directly to the primary tunnel," she whispered, pausing to orient herself. "If we're where I think we are, they'll pass below us in minutes." Nathan checked his weapon expression, resolute. "I'll take Wallace. You focus on freeing your mother." Emma nodded, her own determination matching his. After 8 years of believing her mother gone, after days of revelations and dangers, she would not fail now. They positioned themselves in the connecting passage, waiting in darkness, as sounds of approach echoed through the mine footsteps, the occasional word, the scrape of a boot on stone. Wallace's voice carried clearly in the tunnel's acoustics. "Deep enough, I think. No one will find the body here." The statement sent ice through Emma's veins. This man had orchestrated her father's murder, had planned a mass assassination of association members, and now intended to kill her mother with the same calculating coldness. The culmination of 8 years of deception and danger had come to this moment. Nathan signaled readiness as the footsteps drew closer. They could see lamplight approaching, illuminating the rough-hewn walls of the main shaft. Emma's heart pounded so loudly, she feared it might give away their position. Wallace appeared, first lamp held high, followed by Margaret and her 2 guards. They stopped directly below the connecting passage where Emma and Nathan waited. Wallace gestured to a side tunnel, a dead end leading away from the main shaft. "In there," he directed. "Mining accident. Tragic, but not uncommon." One guard pushed Margaret toward the tunnel, while the other kept his gun trained on her. Wallace remained slightly apart, overseeing, but not directly participating, a man accustomed to others executing his dirty work. Nathan gave the signal. They emerged from the connecting passage, simultaneously dropping to the tunnel floor behind the group. The sound alerted Wallace, who turned sharply. "Drop your weapons!" Nathan ordered, his revolver aimed at Wallace's chest. The guards hesitated, caught off guard by the sudden appearance of armed opponents. Margaret used the distraction to drive her elbow sharply into the nearest guard's ribs, creating distance between them despite her bound hands. For one suspended moment, the tableau held Nathan and Emma with weapons raised, Wallace and his men calculating odds, Margaret poised for further action. Then Wallace's cold composure shattered. "Kill them all!" he shouted, diving for cover as he drew his own weapon. Gunfire erupted in the confined space, the reports deafening as echoes multiplied the sound. Emma fired at the guard nearest her mother, her shot striking his shoulder and spinning him against the wall. Nathan exchanged fire with the second guard, the muzzle flashes creating disorienting strobe effects in the darkness. Emma rushed to Margaret, pulling her behind a support beam for protection, while Nathan engaged Wallace, who had taken position behind a mining cart. The firefight continued, bullets splintering wood and ricocheting off stone walls. "Emma!" Margaret gasped, eyes wide with mingled fear and joy. "You shouldn't be here." "I'm exactly where I should be," Emma replied fiercely, working to untie her mother's bonds. "Finishing what Father started." The wounded guard was recovering, raising his weapon toward them. Emma fired again, her shot more decisive this time. The man collapsed and didn't rise. Wallace, seeing his advantage diminishing, abandoned caution for desperate action. He charged from cover, firing rapidly at Nathan, who dove aside but not quickly enough. A bullet grazed his arm, causing him to drop his weapon. Wallace redirected his aim toward Emma and Margaret. But before he could fire, Nathan tackled him from the side. The two men crashed into the tunnel wall, Wallace's gun discharging harmlessly into the ceiling as they grappled. Despite his injury, Nathan fought with the strength of righteous purpose, driving Wallace back. But the older man possessed surprising vigor, fueled by desperation and rage. He landed a solid blow to Nathan's wounded side, causing him to falter momentarily. Wallace seized the advantage, retrieving his dropped weapon and leveling it at Nathan's head. "The last of William Reed's line," he said, finger tightening on the trigger. "Like father, like son, dying for misguided principle." A shot rang out, echoing through the tunnel. Wallace staggered, confusion crossing his features as he looked down at the spreading crimson stain on his chest. He turned slowly to see Margaret Hayes standing firm, Emma's revolver in her newly freed hands. "For Harold," Margaret said softly, as Wallace collapsed to his knees. The banker's expression registered disbelief, then a strange resignation. "You Hayeses," he murmured. "Always. The last word." He slumped forward onto the tunnel floor, the architect of corruption and murder, finally brought to justice by the woman he had underestimated for 8 years. In the sudden silence, the three survivors regarded each other across the lamplight, Emma, Margaret, and Nathan, connected by loss, by purpose, and now by survival. The moment held a crystalline quality, time suspended as they absorbed the reality that it was truly over. Margaret lowered the revolver, her composed demeanor finally cracking as she reached for her daughter. Emma moved into her mother's embrace, 8 years of separation dissolving in the shared warmth of reunion. Nathan watched with quiet satisfaction, retrieving his weapon and checking the fallen men to ensure the threat was completely neutralized. "We need to leave," he advised gently, after giving mother and daughter a moment. "There may be more coalition men in the compound." Margaret nodded, professional instincts reasserting themselves. "The night shift will have noticed something amiss by now. We should exit through the north shaft again." They moved quickly through the tunnels, Margaret leading with the confidence of one who had memorized every passage during her years of covert surveillance. At one point, they heard voices and footsteps, mine workers investigating the gunshots, but Margaret guided them through a bypass tunnel, avoiding detection. When they finally emerged into the cold night air, through the secondary shaft entrance, the stars blazed overhead in countless pinpoints of light. Emma found herself drawing deep breaths, as if having escaped not just the physical confines of the mine, but the weight of secrets and deceptions that had defined her family for nearly a decade. They retreated to the forest edge where their horses waited, pausing to assess injuries and plan their next move. Nathan's arm required bandaging, the bullet graze, adding to his collection of wounds from their journey. Margaret examined the injury with competent hands, her long experience in the field evident. "You've lost blood," she noted clinically, though her eyes conveyed deeper concern. "We need to get you proper medical attention in Helena." "I've endured worse," Nathan dismissed, though he didn't resist her ministrations. While Margaret tended Nathan, Emma kept watch alert for pursuit. The mine compound remained active, lights moving about, suggesting a search was underway, but no one had yet ventured toward the northern shaft. "What happens now?" Emma asked as they prepared to depart. With the coalition's leadership eliminated, there will be power struggles, Margaret predicted. Lesser members vying for Wallace's position. But we've seized their records, exposed their operations. The association can dismantle what remains through legal channels. And us? Emma pressed the question, encompassing all the uncertainties of her future, their future, now that the mission was complete. Margaret's expression softened. We rebuild, daughter. We honor your father's memory by living the lives our sacrifices have earned. They mounted their horses, Margaret sharing Emma's mount for the journey to Helena. As they rode through the night, mother and daughter gradually bridged 8 years of separation, exchanging abbreviated versions of their lives apart. Margaret described her deep-cover existence, the constant vigilance required, the loneliness of her position. I watched you from afar when I could, she revealed. I knew when you graduated in Boston. James Cooper sent me a newspaper clipping. You could have contacted me, Emma said, old hurt resurfacing, despite her joy at reunion. Margaret's arms tightened around her daughter's waist. Every day I wanted to, but your safety depended on complete separation. Wallace had people watching you in Boston, waiting for any contact that might confirm his suspicions about me. Emma absorbed this, another layer of her mother's sacrifice. And father, did he know how dangerous your position was becoming? He knew, Margaret confirmed softly. We were planning my extraction when he was killed. The coded entries in his journal, they were our plans for reuniting the family. The revelation brought fresh grief for what might have been the family reunion that Harold Hayes had died planning the years together they had lost to Wallace's bullet. Yet, beneath the grief lay a profound appreciation for her parents' courage and principles. Nathan rode slightly ahead, giving them privacy for this conversation while maintaining vigilance for any pursuit. Occasionally, he swayed in the saddle, his injuries and exhaustion taking their toll despite his stoic demeanor. They reached Helena as dawn approached the city, still slumbering, as they made their way to the association's safe house, the watchmaker's shop, where they had planned their intervention at the courthouse. Franklin admitted them immediately, his aged face lighting with satisfaction at the sight of Margaret Hayes. Judge Hayes would be proud to see this day, he told her, clasping her hands warmly. Welcome back to the world, Mrs. Hayes. Inside, Nathan finally succumbed to his injuries and exhaustion, allowing a doctor to be summoned while Emma and Margaret cleaned up and changed into fresh clothing provided by the association. When they reconvened in the shop's back room, association officials were waiting to debrief them. Judge Morrison, the association leader, who had implemented security measures at the courthouse, listened intently to their account of events at the mine. White-haired and distinguished, he had been Harold Hayes's closest colleague and friend. Victor Wallace dead, he marveled when they finished. Daniel Miller also, the coalition's leadership decapitated in a single day. There are still members throughout the territory, Margaret cautioned. Mining interests corrupt officials, enforcers like the men at the mine. But without Wallace's strategic direction or Miller's protection, they're vulnerable, Morrison noted. We've already arrested several in Helena based on evidence from the courthouse incident. Margaret nodded. I've maintained detailed records of their operations for 8 years. Names, transactions, bribes, threats. Everything needed to dismantle their network completely. Those records were what Wallace was collecting when we arrived, Emma added. He knew his operation was compromised. Morrison's expression was somber. Your father would be proud, Margaret. The sacrifice you made, that your entire family made, has finally borne fruit. Emotion flickered across Margaret's composed features. Harold understood the cost when we began this, as did I. But Emma, she glanced at her daughter. Emma paid for our choices without understanding why. Emma reached for her mother's hand, a gesture of reconciliation and understanding. "I understand now," she said softly, "and I would have chosen the same path." Their debriefing continued through the morning. Association members arriving to contribute information or receive assignments as the organization mobilized to capitalize on the coalition's vulnerability. Emma watched with growing appreciation for the network her father had helped build, principled men and women committed to Montana's honest governance. By midday, Nathan had rejoined them, his arm properly bandaged and his more serious wound treated. Though still pale from blood loss, his eyes were clear and alert as he participated in planning the next phases of the coalition's dismantling. "Federal marshals are being dispatched to Silver Creek," Morrison informed them. "They'll secure the mine and arrest any remaining coalition members. Margaret's documentation will be crucial to subsequent prosecutions." "And the territorial government?" Nathan inquired. "How deeply has the coalition penetrated official channels?" "Deeply," Margaret confirmed. "The governor himself is compromised, though more through manipulation than willing participation. Several judges, the land office commissioner, half the territorial legislature, all influenced or controlled by Wallace." "Then our work is far from complete," Morrison concluded. "We've won a decisive battle, but the war for Montana's soul continues." As the meeting adjourned, Morrison approached Emma privately. "Your father's position on the territorial court remains vacant," he said. "The association would support your appointment once you've had time to consider." The suggestion startled Emma. "I'm a teacher, not a jurist." "You're Harold Hayes's daughter," Morrison countered. "With his principles and intelligence, clearly. The territory needs leaders of integrity as we rebuild." The idea planted Morrison left her to consider it while he consulted with other association members. Emma found herself standing by the window watching Helena's citizens going about their daily business, unaware of how profoundly their territory's future had changed overnight. Nathan joined her, his presence quiet but supportive. "Judge Hayes," he said, testing the title. "It suits you." Emma smiled faintly. "I haven't accepted." "But you're considering it," he observed. "As you should. You have your father's clarity of purpose, your mother's determination." "And what of you, Marshal Reed?" Emma asked, turning to face him. "With the coalition broken, what path will you follow?" Something subtle shifted in Nathan's expression, a warmth that had nothing to do with their shared mission. "I find myself reluctant to leave Montana," he admitted. "There are compelling reasons to remain." The meaning behind his words hung between them, acknowledgement of feelings that had developed during their days of shared danger and purpose. Emma felt a corresponding warmth rise within her, not the urgent heat of crisis, but something steadier, more enduring. "Montana does seem to require our continued attention," she agreed, allowing a small smile to curve her lips. Any further conversation was interrupted by Margaret's approach. She had been watching their interaction from across the room, her perceptive eyes missing nothing of the connection forming between them. "Judge Morrison has invited us to stay at his home until matters are settled," she informed them. "I've accepted on our behalf. You both need proper rest and recovery." They left the watchmaker's shop shortly thereafter, emerging into Helena's bright afternoon. The streets were busy with the usual commerce and activity, though Emma noted increased territorial police presence, the association ensuring security in the wake of the thwarted assassination plot. At Morrison's comfortable home, they were provided with private rooms and a proper meal, the first they'd enjoyed since leaving Copper Creek days earlier. The simple pleasures of clean clothing, hot food, and soft beds seemed extraordinary after their ordeal. That evening, they gathered in Morrison's study, where a fire blazed cheerfully in the hearth. The contrast with their recent experiences, hiding in abandoned cabins, fleeing through snowy wilderness, confronting killers in dark mine tunnels, was almost disorienting. To Harold Hayes, Morrison proposed raising a glass in toast. Whose vision for Montana we carry forward. They drank solemnly the bittersweet acknowledgement of victory achieved at terrible cost. Emma felt the weight of her father's absence keenly in this moment of triumph he had not lived to see. As the evening progressed, Morrison and Margaret discussed association business. The reorganization needed priorities for prosecution strategies for reform. Emma participated occasionally, but found herself increasingly distracted by exhaustion and the emotional aftermath of their journey. Nathan noticed her fatigue before the others. "Perhaps Miss Hayes should rest," he suggested gently. "The past days have demanded much." Margaret immediately agreed, her maternal concern evident. "Of course. We've all earned respite." Emma acquiesced, recognizing her limits at last. Before retiring, she embraced her mother once more, still marveling at the reality of her presence after so many years of absence. "I'll be here in the morning," Margaret promised, understanding the lingering fear behind her daughter's embrace. "And all the mornings after. That I swear to you." In her assigned room, Emma stood at the window gazing out at Helena's nighttime panorama. Lights twinkled in homes and businesses, ordinary lives continuing while hers had transformed completely. In just days, she had found her mother avenged. Her father helped prevent a massacre and discovered a purpose beyond teaching, perhaps even a future beyond solitude. A soft knock interrupted her reflections. She opened the door to find Nathan in the hallway, hesitation evident in his posture. "Forgive the intrusion," he said. "I wanted to ensure you were settled comfortably." Emma recognized the pretext for what it was, a desire to connect once more before the day ended, to acknowledge privately what they had experienced together. "Please come in," she invited, leaving the door partially open for propriety's sake. Nathan entered, but remained standing near the threshold, maintaining a respectful distance that somehow emphasized the connection between them rather than diminishing it. "We succeeded," he said simply. "Your father's work, my father's work, completed at last." "Not completed," Emma corrected gently. "Continued. As Morrison said, there's still much to do." Nathan nodded, a small smile touching his features. "Always the teacher precise in your language." "And you, will you continue with the Marshal's service?" Emma asked, returning to their earlier interrupted conversation. "I've been offered a position coordinating between the association and territorial law enforcement," he revealed, "based here in Helena." Emma felt a quiet satisfaction at this news. "Then you're staying in Montana." "It seems my path leads here," Nathan agreed, his gaze steady on hers. "Though much depends on various factors." The implication hung between them, neither quite ready to articulate feelings still forming amid the aftershocks of crisis. They had found each other during extraordinary circumstances. Ordinary life would require different courage. "I've been offered a judgeship," Emma confided. "My father's seat." "You'd excel in the role," Nathan said with immediate certainty. "Montana needs leadership of your caliber." "I haven't decided," Emma admitted. "Teaching has been my life, and yet duty calls," Nathan finished for her. "As it did for your parents." They stood in companionable silence, both contemplating futures suddenly rich with possibility and with each other's presence. Outside the window, stars glittered in Montana's vast sky, the same stars that had guided them through wilderness and danger, the same stars under which they had made their silent oaths to justice and to each other. "Whatever you decide," Nathan said, finally moving slightly closer, "know that I That is, I hope our paths will continue to intersect. Emma smiled, the expression reaching her eyes for perhaps the first time since their journey began. I believe they will, Marshall read. Some connections once forged cannot be broken. He took her hand, then a gesture of profound simplicity after all they had endured together. His touch was warm, steady, like the man himself. Until tomorrow, then, he said softly. Until tomorrow. Emma agreed. After Nathan departed, Emma returned to the window, her hand still warm from his touch. Montana stretched before her, a territory standing at the crossroads of corruption and justice, wilderness and civilization. Her parents had sacrificed everything to guide it toward the latter. Perhaps it was her inheritance to continue that work. The North Star shone brightly overhead, the constant guide her father had taught her to trust the light that had led her through wilderness, both physical and emotional. Emma touched the silver star pendant at her throat, feeling its points press against her fingertips like a pledge renewed. For you, Father, she whispered to the night. I'll continue. 3 days later, Emma Hayes stood before the territorial court, taking the oath of office as Montana's newest judge. Margaret watched from the front row, pride illuminating her features, as her daughter pledged to uphold justice and law in the territory her family had fought to protect. Nathan Reed stood nearby, his official position as liaison between the association and territorial marshals, complementing Emma's judicial role. Their eyes met briefly during the ceremony, a private acknowledgement of the journey that had brought them to this moment and the journey still to come. Outside the courthouse, the Montana winter had settled fully across the land, snow blanketing the streets of Helena and the distant mountains. But within the Hayes family, spring had arrived at last, a season of renewal after the long winter of separation and sacrifice. As Judge Emma Hayes descended from the bench to embrace her mother, the silver star pendant gleamed at her throat, a symbol of the oath renewed beneath Montana stars, a promise kept across generations, and a beacon for the territory's future. In that moment, Harold Hayes's vision lived on in his daughter's commitment to justice, in his wife's triumphant return from darkness, and in the love that had survived separation, betrayal, and death to emerge stronger than before. The Hayes family's sacrifice had not been in vain. Montana's future would be built on the foundation they had laid, one principled decision at a time. And in the years to come, the story would be told throughout the territory of a judge's daughter and a marshal's son who braved wilderness and corruption to fulfill their father's legacy, finding in each other the strength to forge a new Montana, a new family, and a new beginning under those vast and guiding stars.